Donald Trump has done a couple of things that are worthy of noting. He's put Thom Price in charge of HHS, or he's going to. Thom Price is an orthopedic surgeon who's a Republican member of Congress who hates Obamacare. Now, in a pure marketplace, of course, an orthopedic surgeon would probably make $50,000, $60,000 a year because there'd be no limit to the number of people who could go to medical school. But because Thom Price comes out of the world, he has a union, basically, the AMA, that protects the number of doctors out there, so doctors make really high salaries or pay or whatever on a pay for services. Orthopedic surgeons are right at the top, you know, along with plastic surgeons and heart surgeons, of the people who make the very most money on a fee-for-services basis, on, you know, basically the medical system that we have, as opposed to, for example, the way that, well, for example, the British Health Service, where everybody is an employee of the health service. So regardless of what kind of doctor you are, you all get basically the same salary. There might be an increase in the salary based on how many years you had to learn your specialty. But beyond that, you know, it's basically just a salary, regardless of how many procedures you do, that sort of thing. And you know, that clinic up in Minnesota is, you know, that's so famous. And a number of the, say what? Yeah, the Mayo Clinic. Thank you, Chris. And a number of the others, you know, around the country, there's, you know, they're essentially, they're the same thing. They basically pay their doctors on salaries. But you know, Thom Price would like to see some more bucks in the pockets of his buddies, I'm guessing. And that's a news story. You know, he's probably the most anti-Obamacare guy in the House, or one of them, and he's going to be in charge of HHS, which is not a good thing if you like Obamacare. But again, that's what Trump promised us. But as that story comes out, that Trump is going to destroy your health care, and Paul Ryan's story comes out that Paul Ryan is going to privatize Medicare in the first budget that they're going to submit here, you know, after the first of the year. And as there's growing Sturm and Drang around Trump's personal finances, conflicts of interest, relationships, personal relationships, business relationships with weird folks and dictators and oligarchs all over the world, and not to mention the mob, as all of that stuff is like boiling to the surface, once again, this is the evil genius of Donald Trump. He sits down to his Twitter account this morning and says, okay, it's going to be a bad day for me in the news cycle. They're going to be focusing on how I'm going to try and, you know, destroy the social safety net and all those blue-collar voters, those poor, working poor white people who voted for me. I'm going to cost them a lot of money on health care. And, you know, if they've got Medicaid or Medicare or Obamacare right now, they're going to be screwed. So how do I change the subject so nobody notices that what I'm doing is just to make the insurance companies, who are big donors to the Republican Party, richer? And you know, how do we change the topic? Well, let's talk about flag burning. That's always good to change the topic whenever Republicans are up to no good, whenever Republicans are trying to rig the economy, whenever Republicans find themselves in a bind because you know, on those rare occasions when the news actually talks about an issue. I mean, it's like right now, MSNBC is talking about Thom Price, you know, running HHS. You think they're going to discuss how he's going to take apart Medicare or Obamacare, or, you know, what the plans are? Of course they're not. Oh, he was humbled. He's humbled by, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And, you know, John McCain, oh, I'm not going to talk about Donald. It's like the whole media, you know, is, at least the corporate media, they're entirely about personality and horse race and game. This is serious stuff. This is serious stuff that Donald Trump is up to. And then when he reaches for something to change the subject, I realized during the primary he could change the subject very easily by simply saying things like George W. Bush was the worst president ever, or, you know, John McCain, he's not one of my favorite war heroes. He got caught. or, you know, making fun of a disabled reporter. I mean, you know, it's like every day on the campaign, and it seemed literally like every day. It might have been every other day, but pretty much every day of the campaign, Donald Trump figured out a way to seize control of the news cycle and push it away from any positive news. You know, Jeb Bush would have some great new, you know, policy initiative on something or other, and Donald Trump would just do something crazy on Twitter, and the media, like a, you know, like a pack of hungry dogs, you know, chasing somebody carrying a can of an open can of dog food, would just go lurching after him. And Romney would be standing, excuse me, and Jeb Bush would be standing there going, huh? What? Where'd everybody go? What's going on? So he did this with flag burning today. Now, the reason that this is consequential is because this is one of the first marks of authoritarianism, you know, of fascism. I mean, I almost opened the show saying, you know, I love the smell of fascism in the morning, but I don't. It's the exact opposite. Trump wants it to be a crime to desecrate an American flag. Now, this amendment has been proposed in Congress, and it's passed the House of Representatives pretty much, you know, every year since the 80s. Never passes the Senate. And there have been individual state laws, in fact, 48 out of the 50 states over the years. The Republicans made this a big issue during the 80s, during the Reagan years, when they were trying to divert our attention away from things like Iran-Contra, Reagan's treason, or Reagan's disasters with the economy, Reagan's jacking, you know, probably the 16th, 17th, 18th time that Reagan increased taxes and fees on working people and cut taxes on billionaires. I mean, there was a lot that Reagan was doing where they needed to get people not to talk about that, but to talk about something else. So they did this whole flag burning thing. And, you know, they've been pulling it out of the back pocket ever since whenever they're in trouble. George W. Bush tried it in 2006. And, you know, I think my recollection is it passed and the Supreme Court struck it down. Let me get to the actual details. But George W. Bush tried this again in 2006 when things weren't going so well for him. And, yeah, here, the Flag Desecration Amendment. It was the original, the Flag Protection Act was passed by Congress in '68. Now, this was an effort by LBJ to get, and the Democrats and Republicans, you know, to get Americans to stop talking about Vietnam and start talking about those stupid protesters who are burning flags. 48 of the 50 states passed similar laws. These were first overturned by the Supreme Court in Texas v. Johnson in 1989. So Congress responded with a new law called the Flag Protection Act, a new version of it, which the Supreme Court then struck down in 1990 in a case called U.S. versus Eichmann. The majority opinion, by the way, was authored by Antonin Scalia and Anthony Kennedy. Every Congress since the Johnson decision was, this is Texas v. Johnson in '89, has considered creating a flag desecration amendment. You know, lots of stuff to you know, distract our attention. That's the kind of, you know, cynical political view of it. But the dangerous part of this is that this is how fascism, as in authoritarian fascism, not just corporate fascism, this is how it begins. It's criminalizing dissent. And this is the basis by which the Supreme Court struck down the flag-burning amendments, was by saying that in virtually every case where a flag was burned inappropriately or illegally in a violation of the statutes, it was an act of political speech. And if a billionaire giving $1 million to a politician and then the politician passing legislation that lowers that billionaire's taxes, if that's an act of political speech, why is burning a flag in protest of stupid wars overseas not a similar act of political speech? So the bottom line here is that Donald Trump is saying, let's criminalize dissent.